On a quiet summer night in Georgia, a single gunshot shattered the silence. A young man, once full of life and dreams, lay bleeding on the floor, while the woman he loved frantically called 911. Was it a tragic accident or something far more sinister? The truth would divide a community and leave a jury struggling to deliver justice. Hey, true crime fans, I'm Eamon, and I'm thrilled to share crime tales across times with you. Each episode, we'll explore a new case, examining the evidence and discussing the twists and turns. My goal is to create a community where we can discuss these cases, share our thoughts, and learn from each other. So, let's get started. Stephen Freeman was the kind of person you couldn't help but like. Born and raised in Griffin, Georgia, he had that rare ability to make people feel comfortable and valued. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but his energy was magnetic. Friends and family described him as kind, funny, and fiercely loyal, someone who would drop everything to help a friend in need. From a young age, Stephen had a deep love for the outdoors. He grew up exploring the forests and rivers around his hometown, often spending weekends camping, fishing, or working on his truck. His hands were always busy, whether fixing an engine or cracking open a cold one with his friends after a long day. He loved the simplicity of life, the kind that didn't require fancy plans or big ambitions, just good company and the freedom to roam. But beyond his rugged, adventurous side, Stephen was also a deeply caring person. He had a way of making people laugh, even when things were tough. He cherished his relationships, especially with his close-knit group of friends who saw him as the glue that held everyone together. And when he fell in love, he loved with his whole heart. Mary Katherine Higdon grew up just a few miles away from Stephen. She was known for her vibrant personality, deeply passionate, artistic, and full of emotion. She had an eye for photography, loved animals, and had dreams of making a difference in the world. Raised in a home that valued discipline and hard work, she was independent and strong-willed. Her family was comfortable with firearms, and she grew up around them, learning how to handle them safely. It was just a normal part of life in their community, where hunting and self-defense were common practices. But while Mary Katherine had a caring and affectionate side, she was also intense when it came to her emotions. Friends noted that she could be deeply loving one moment and fiercely angry the next. She wore her heart on her sleeve, and when she loved someone, she loved them deeply, sometimes overwhelmingly so. Stephen and Mary Katherine met in high school, and from the start, there was an undeniable spark. Stephen was the charming, easygoing guy who made life fun, while Mary Katherine was passionate and expressive, drawn to his warmth and stability. They quickly became inseparable, spending every moment together. Their love story seemed like the kind people write songs about. They went on road trips, had lazy summer days by the lake, and spent weekends watching movies or hanging out with friends. 7 years together made them more than just a couple. They became a part of each other's lives in a way that felt permanent. Everyone thought they were the perfect match. They had been together so long that marriage seemed like the next step. But behind the smiles and shared memories, cracks were forming in their relationship. Cracks that no one outside their world fully saw. It was a quiet evening in Griffin, Georgia, until a frantic 911 call shattered the calm. On the line was Mary Katherine Higdon, her voice trembling with panic. She could barely get the words out. "Oh my God, I accidentally shot my boyfriend. Please hurry." The dispatcher tried to keep her calm, asking for details. Mary Katherine sobbed as she explained that she had been handing a gun to Stephen Freeman when it suddenly went off. Within minutes, officers and paramedics rushed to the scene. When the first responders arrived at the couple's home, they found Stephen Freeman lying on the floor, bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound to the chest. He was unresponsive. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the carpet. The air was thick with the metallic scent of gunpowder and blood. Mary Katherine was standing nearby, visibly distressed, her hands shaking. Tears streamed down her face as she repeated her story to the officers. She had been handing him the gun when it accidentally discharged. But something wasn't right. Inconsistencies that raised questions. The officers noticed several red flags immediately. Stephen had been shot in the chest at close range. If the gun had just gone off accidentally while being handed over, why was the wound in such a precise spot? Mary Katherine was no stranger to firearms. She had grown up in a gun-friendly home and was known to be comfortable handling them. How could she have made such a fatal mistake? There were no visible signs that Stephen had been reaching for the gun. If she had been handing it to him, wouldn't his hands have been near the firearm when it went off? The inconsistencies continued as investigators began their work. As officers questioned Mary Katherine, she struggled to explain exactly what had happened. At first, she said she was handing the gun to Stephen while he sat on the couch. But when detectives pressed her for details, her story shifted. She claimed she didn't know the gun was loaded. Then she said she didn't remember pulling the trigger. Her words became jumbled and her tears intensified. Something didn't add up. While Stephen fought for his life, investigators began speaking to friends and family. They quickly learned that Stephen and Mary Katherine's relationship was not as perfect as it seemed. Stephen had told friends just 2 days earlier that he was planning to leave her. He had packed some of his belongings and was ready to move on. Their relationship had been volatile. Friends recalled that Mary Katherine could be possessive and jealous. There were rumors that she had even threatened Stephen with a gun before. Mary Katherine had a history of anger issues. Some friends mentioned seeing bruises on Stephen in the past, though he always brushed them off. It was starting to look less like an accident and more like a crime of passion. Despite the paramedics' efforts, Stephen Freeman did not survive. He was pronounced dead at the scene. A bright, adventurous 23-year-old was gone in an instant. As the weight of what had happened sank in, Mary Katherine sobbed uncontrollably. But was it grief or guilt? The trial and justice, a battle of truth and lies. The courtroom was packed as Mary Katherine Higdon faced trial for the shooting death of Stephen Freeman. To the public, the case seemed simple. Stephen had been shot at close range, and Mary Katherine's story had changed multiple times. But the legal battle that followed revealed shocking twists, conflicting narratives, and a desperate fight for freedom. The prosecution's case. The prosecution argued that Stephen's death was no accident, but the result of a volatile and possessive girlfriend lashing out in a fit of rage. From the night of the shooting, Mary Katherine had told multiple versions of what happened. First, she said the gun accidentally discharged while she was handing it to Stephen. Then, when pressed, she claimed she couldn't remember pulling the trigger. Mary Katherine was raised around firearms and was comfortable handling them. How could she have made such a careless mistake? Just 2 days before his death, Stephen had told friends he was planning to break up with Mary Katherine. He had packed some belongings, hinting at a clean break. The prosecution argued that she couldn't handle losing him, so she made sure no one else could have him either. Witnesses revealed that this wasn't the first time Mary Katherine had pulled a gun on Stephen. friends recalled at least one prior incident where she had threatened him with a firearm during an argument. Perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence, hours before the shooting, Mary Katherine had searched for violent pornography. Prosecutors suggested this showed a disturbed mindset leading up to the crime. The picture they painted was one of premeditated violence, a girlfriend who, consumed by jealousy and control, ended an innocent man's life. But the defense team had a very different story to tell. Mary Katherine Higdon's attorneys wasted no time in flipping the narrative. From the moment the trial began, they painted a drastically different picture, one where Stephen Freeman wasn't the victim, but the aggressor. They claimed that for years, Mary Katherine had lived under the shadow of fear, trapped in a relationship filled with manipulation, control, and violence. This wasn't just a case of a jealous girlfriend lashing out in anger, they argued. It was the breaking point of a young woman who had endured more than anyone had ever known. One of their most powerful pieces of evidence was a series of text messages, 63 pages worth, that they claimed exposed the dark underbelly of Stephen and Mary Katherine's relationship. These messages, according to the defense, revealed Stephen as a controlling and emotionally manipulative boyfriend, someone who would guilt-trip Mary Katherine, lash out in anger, and demand control over her life. They argued that behind closed doors, Stephen had a temper, one that Mary Katherine had learned to fear. She had never reported him, never told anyone the full extent of what she had suffered. But in private, she had lived in constant anxiety about what might set him off next. But it wasn't just emotional abuse that the defense claimed Mary Katherine had endured. For the first time, in the middle of the trial, she made a shocking allegation. Stephen had been physically and sexually abusive as well. She described a pattern of coercion and violence, moments where she felt powerless, trapped, unable to escape. She had stayed silent for years, they said, because she was too scared to come forward. And then, on the night of August 1st, 2018, she finally snapped. The defense's version of that night was different from the one Mary Katherine had originally given. At first, she had told police the gun had gone off by accident as she was handing it to Stephen. But now, her story changed. She claimed that Stephen had lunged at her, and in a moment of panic and fear, she had fired. It wasn't premeditated, she insisted. It wasn't something she had planned. It was instinct, the reaction of someone who had spent years afraid for her life. Her attorneys brought in an expert witness to explain why her story had changed, why she hadn't spoken about the abuse before, and why she had acted the way she did. They argued that Mary Katherine showed clear signs of battered woman syndrome, a psychological condition that develops in victims of long-term abuse. Women suffering from it often feel trapped, helpless, unable to leave even when they know they should. They become conditioned to believe that their abuser has complete control over them, that no one will believe them, that there is no escape. The defense suggested that when Stephen moved toward her that night, something inside Mary Katherine snapped. Years of fear, of silence, of suffering boiled over, and she pulled the trigger before she could even think. But the prosecution wasn't about to let that argument go unchallenged. They pointed out that Mary Katherine's allegations of abuse had never surfaced before. There were no police reports, no hospital visits, no witnesses to back up her claims. None of Stephen's friends or family had ever seen him act violently toward her, and there was no physical evidence to prove he had harmed her in the past. The most damning detail, prosecutors argued, was that her story had changed so drastically. First, it was an accident. Then, it was self-defense. how could the jury trust someone who kept shifting their version of events? There was also the forensic evidence. Experts testified that the gun had been fired from close range, in a way that suggested intent rather than panic. They also revealed something even more disturbing. Just hours before the shooting, Mary Katherine had searched for violent pornography on her phone. Was that just a coincidence? Or was it a glimpse into something darker? The prosecution suggested that this search might indicate a premeditated act, a sign that she had been thinking about violence long before she pulled the trigger. The courtroom was tense as both sides fought to control the narrative. Was Mary Katherine a woman who had suffered in silence for years, finally pushed to her breaking point? Or was she a possessive, unstable girlfriend who couldn't handle losing the man she loved? The jury had no easy answers. There were no witnesses to the shooting, no cameras, no definitive proof of what had really happened in those final moments. All they had were two competing stories, one of a frightened victim, the other of a calculated killer. And in the end, it was up to them to decide which one they believed. The prosecution's closing argument was chilling. Mary Katherine Higdon didn't pull the trigger out of fear. She pulled it out of anger. And when she realized what she had done, she panicked. She lied. And now she's trying to rewrite history. After days of emotional testimony and forensic evidence, the jury deliberated. Then the verdict was announced. Not guilty of murder. However, she was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, meaning the jury believed she had caused Stephen's death recklessly, but without intent. Mary Katherine was sentenced to serve 10 years, a sentence that left Stephen's family heartbroken. To this day, opinions remain divided. Some believe Mary Katherine was a victim who acted in fear, while others see her as a manipulative woman who got away with murder. But one fact remains: Stephen Freeman is gone forever. The case tore apart families and divided public opinion. Stephen's loved ones mourned a life taken too soon, while Mary Katherine's supporters insisted she was a victim of abuse who acted in fear. After deliberating the conflicting evidence, the jury reached its verdict. The weight of the evidence, or lack thereof, made the decision incredibly difficult. In the end, justice was served. But not everyone agreed on what that meant. The case of Stephen Freeman and Mary Katherine Higdon is one filled with complexities, conflicting narratives, and unanswered questions. Was Mary Katherine a victim who lashed out in fear, or a jealous girlfriend who let her anger take control? Could the jury have ruled differently? And how should justice be served when the truth remains so elusive? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more shocking true crime stories from around the world. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant. This is Crime Tales Across Times, signing off.